Welcome back, folks. Welcome to World War II TV. We are off to the Arctic again on the channel. A couple of years ago, we looked at the disaster of PQ17. That was with Dragonifel. Well, today, John McKay is here to talk about PQ18, an altogether different experience, a different convoy. The links to John's book are in the description below. All the information you need is in the description below. Merchandise links, links to my guest websites, etc., etc., etc. Without further ado, I'll bring John in. Good evening, sir. How are you today?
I'm fine, Paul. Thanks for inviting me on your show. It's very much appreciate it. I hope everybody enjoys what we're going to discuss now.
Well, it's kind of a sequel, as I said in the top of the show. There, we did PQ17. This is like Rocky the Return, kind of.
Yeah, well, PQ18 obviously it followed PQ17, and it was PQ17 pretty much dictated how PQ18 was set up and how it was and how important it became because of the disaster of PQ17. PQ18, of course, became absolutely massively important, not only for the British, but for the Germans as well. The reason being, both sides saw an opportunity here. The Germans especially saw if they could do the same to PQ18 as what they did to PQ17, well, then the whole Arctic routes could maybe become untenable for the British and the Allies. The British then realised this, so they needed to make PQ18 pretty much the most best defended Arctic convoy of the whole war to that point. And so, as we'll discuss as we go on, it was like I said, it was massively important that PQ18 got through for not just for that reason, but also because the Battle of Stalingrad was just kicking off down in southern Russia. So the Russians needed those vital supplies, and if the Germans could stop them getting to Archangel on the White Sea, well, then that would be a massive bonus for them for what was to come later.
Super. Well, great introduction. So I'm in charge of the slides today, which John has produced. Folks, if you have questions, kind of fire away. If they're pertinent to kind of what's on screen, we'll ask them as we go along. If there's any kind of big ones about the principle behind Arctic convoys or something else, we'll do them at the end. But basically, I'm going to hand over to John to kind of take us through this.
Yeah, if you just bring the first slide up, it's just a quick background into just click on the one slide there. Oh, there we go. Yeah, a very quick background into how the Arctic convoys themselves came about. As we know, with the fall of France in May-June 1940, Britain, I've put alone in the inverted commas there because obviously some debate on whether we were actually on our own or not after that. However, for all intents and purposes, Britain was the only viable fighting country against Germany after that, particularly the European and the like North African theatres. So when the Germans invaded Russia in March 1940, was it March? No, sorry, June 1941, with Operation Barbarossa, taking the Soviets completely by surprise. Britain saw an opportunity. Well, Winston Churchill himself saw an opportunity here. Stalin appealed to Churchill directly for aid to assist with repelling the Germans. So what Churchill did was he thought, okay, there's a potential huge ally here for us. So when Stalin asked for that assistance, he readily accepted that we send some stuff. So very, very quickly, Operation Dervish, which was the very first Arctic convoy, was set up. It sailed from Liverpool on 12th of August 1941. So you're talking just a couple of months after the invasion. It was only 7 merchant ships at that point, with escorted by 14 Royal Navy warships. And they took supplies up to the port of, I think it was Archangel, arriving there on the 31st of August. It was unmolested. The Germans knew nothing about it, and it got through without any hindrance. That then led on to subsequent convoys that followed. I've put Iceland as a little point. So very, very quick mention about Iceland. On the very day that Winston Churchill became Prime Minister, on the 10th of May 1940, Britain actually invaded Iceland. We'd asked previously, could we use their ports for our for naval bases, and they'd refused. So we sent the 2nd Royal Marines on 2 cruisers, went over there under Commander Colonel Robert Sturgis, and they literally took over the island and took over the ports with the promise that we would leave when hostilities ended. Now, the reason for that was if we didn't have our ships based at Iceland and the Germans had done it instead of us, there was no way the Atlantic convoys could happen. There was no way the Russian convoys afterwards could happen. So the strategic importance of Iceland is just massive in terms of World War II. Early in 1942, because these convoys were getting bigger and bigger, the British Admiralty decided that they would muster at Loch Ewe at the north in northern Scotland. So the majority of a lot of the cargo ships would go there and then travel under escort up to Iceland, where they would be met by further cargo ships coming from Canada and from the United States, and then they would form up, and the defensive escorts would then set up around them, and then off they'd go. So if you click on, there we go. This is got a very good map. It just shows you the routes of the convoy. Of course, in the summertime, they were able to travel further north to try and avoid the U-boats as much as they could, and also avoid the German air bases that were based in northern Norway. So make it more difficult for them to attack, and also to them to find as well. In the winter, they had to be pushed further south because of the freezing of the sea. So they were forced further south, closer to the bases. But there was kind of flip side to that, because during the winter, the hours of sunlight were very, 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 very only a few hours a day. In the summer, it was massive. There was loads of sunlight for the aircraft to come and attack should they do that. So that was, and the two ports they were docking at was Murmansk on the Barents Sea and Archangel on the White Sea. They're the two ports that they delivered all the kit to.
You can kind of see that Iceland is like the Malta of this battle in a sense.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. You can see from the map how important it is. If you had the German U-boats sailing from there out into the Atlantic, the convoys would have been Atlantic convoys would have been smashed to bits all the time. It would have been shocking. So if we move on with what, there we go. So just to point out the threats that were to PQ18 and to the convoys. Of course, Kriegsmarine surface ships. Now, at the time of PQ18, there was the base up at Altenfjord. There were 3 German battleships. Admiral Scheer, the Admiral Hipper, and the Koln were all based up there with many more warships. Now, that was northern Norway, so at any point they could move out into the Barents Sea and attack the convoy. Luftwaffe torpedo bombers as well. Now, the bases at Banak and Bardufoss in northern Norway. There was a guy called Werner Klumper, and he was a German air race, basically. And he was a trainer of torpedo bombers down in Grosseto in Italy. He and his squadrons were moved up to Bardufoss air base purely to attack PQ18. That was part of the Germans' plan of stopping PQ18. So this highly experienced and brilliant pilot, he was there with Junkers 88s, Heinkel HE-111s, all ready to go and attack the convoy once they knew where it was. Of course, the U-boat Wolfpacks, they were the scourge of the Atlantic convoys as well. They were based obviously in France, in Lorient and places like Brest. They were out patrolling, looking for the convoy once it's set. And how did they know where it was? Point underneath, B-Dienst, which stands for, I have to read this because it's hard to say, Beobachtungsdienst, which was the German naval intelligence. Now, the funny thing about that, or what a lot of people probably don't know, is that although the British broke the Enigma code, the Germans also broke ours, and they would decode our signals, and they were fully aware PQ18 was going to sail. They were fully aware when it was going to sail, and they could pinpoint pretty much roughly where the route it was going to take. Not to a specific spot, but they could have a rough idea through the signals that was going backwards and forwards. So they were able then to send out their spotter planes to go and find them, and then they would relay those messages back to the Kriegsmarine, who would then pass it on to the U-boats and the Luftwaffe. And so they kind of pretty much knew where we were throughout the whole journey, to be honest. And finally, one of the biggest threats ever was the weather. The weather up there is horrendous. I can't emphasize that. I mean, I've known 3 sailors who sailed these convoys that all passed away, unfortunately. And Charlie Erswell, who wrote his memoir a few years ago, he was on PQ18. It was his first journey, and he said the weather was absolutely, you would not believe how bad it got. So it's with storms that would just appear from nowhere, the thick ice that would develop on the ships that they had to go out and smash and throw overboard. All this between getting attacked by U-boats and attacked by Luftwaffe aircraft as well. So say the weather, and later on in the convoy, as we get to it, it just got even worse. So if you want to flick to the next one, yeah, again, just a very very quick. I've already mentioned PQ17. But this dates the 27th of June to the 10th of July. On the 4th of July, intelligence got to the Admiralty that the Tirpitz was on the move, and it was about to. It didn't know where it was. Basically, it was going out, possibly potentially to attack the convoy. Dudley Pound, sorry, the First Sea Lord gave the order for the convoy, so the escorts to be withdrawn, and for the convoy to scatter and make their own way to Archangel. The reason for that was that to try and avoid actually what happened, it left them unprotected, and 11 out of the there was 24 out of the 35 ships on that convoy were sunk. It was a complete and utter disaster. Churchill called it one of the most melancholy naval episodes in the whole war, is how he described it. And like I say, that kind of led to PQ18. We've got to protect this more now for the reasons that we've just said. So the preparation for it, just a quick brief on the quotas. Now, between the two countries, Russia and Britain, we would agree what we were sending. So whether it was tanks, whether it was how many tanks they wanted and what type, artillery pieces, ammunition, medicines, food, raw materials, all that kind of stuff. There were certain quotas for each convoy. So of course, when PQ17 was sunk, the majority of all that kit that was going out there was bottom of the sea. That was never going to get there. So again, PQ18 it became massively important. The ships were loaded pretty much as PQ17 was taking place, but there was every available space on those ships was filled with war material. Not only in the holds but on the decks. They were strapped to decks, tanks, and all kinds of things. So that was that. Again, the Battle of Stalingrad made it massively important because that was just in its infancy. It was just starting off, but obviously we know the outcome of that would probably determine pretty much who won the war on the Eastern Front. If the Germans won the Battle of Stalingrad, who knows what would have happened? The Russians, as we know, did. And I'm not saying PQ18 made that happen, but it certainly had a contribution towards the kit that they had there. Operation Orator, I'll get you to flick on it a second. Actually, you might as well flick on it now. Just once we'll flip back to this. Now, Operation Orator was the code name for the air cover for PQ18. So a guy called Frank Hops, whose picture's there, he was put in charge, and he went over to Russia to coordinate the defense of PQ18 from Russia airwise. So they sent over Catalinas from 210 Squadron who were based at Grozny, and they were to patrol that area that you can see there that's marked over the top. And they'd be looking for minefields, they'd be looking for U-boats, they'd be looking to see if any of the German ships coming out of Altenfjord, which is just marked on the map just to the top there. So that was pretty much the Catalina's job, and also to go fly sometimes near Narvik where the Tirpitz was, just to ensure that that was staying where it was. They also sent over one PRU, which is photographic reconnaissance unit. They would fly daily flights over Altenfjord to look at the ships in dock and see if there's any sign of any movement from them, so they have an early warning for the convoy that they were about to come out. And also they had some Hampton bombers based at Afrikander, which was just, again, all these bases were pretty close together, to be fair. Now, what they were for was that should any of these ships decide they're going to leave port and attack, the Hampton bombers would go in and they would attack the German shipping. So that was pretty much the idea of that. So if you just flip back again, that was Operation Orator. Operation Eve is pretty much the code name for the ships that would provide the cover, the close escort cover on the journey, or the destroyers, which the distinct cover force was. Sorry, there. Come back to that in a second. No, so for the fighter, destroyer, and escort. Sorry, they would. There was 16 destroyers. There was trawlers, anti-submarine trawlers, and minesweepers and corvettes. There was loads of protection for and bespoke anti-aircraft ships as well. The cruiser cover force that would a patrol that would happen in the Norwegian Sea led by a guy called Stuart Bonham Carter, distant relation of Helena Bonham Carter, I believe. I've read his orders that he gave to the ships. There's one thing fascinating me on it, to be honest. So before they set sail, he gave orders out to the ship's captains of what would happen during the convoy, what their jobs were, and what should happen should they come under attack. And one thing he did say was, "It is not my intention to engage any enemy unit, which includes Tirpitz." So it leads you to think, well, okay, so if the Tirpitz does come out, what exactly are these cruisers going to do? They're just going to back off and let them. So it kind of confused me a bit, that. So, I found that a bit quite fascinating, that he wasn't prepared to commit his cruisers to fight the Tirpitz if it should come out of harbour, so out of port, sorry. So that's just one little aside there. Distant Cover Force was another patrol led by Bruce Fraser of another load of ships that would be, be able to call into should any kind of major sea battle develop. RAF Coastal Command would provide cover with Catalinas up to the point of range until they were out of range. Looking for U-boats and looking for mines and anything else that may cause any kind of problem for the convoy. And as well, there was 9 submarines would patrol off the Lafferton Islands, not far from Narvik. So should again the Tirpitz come out, you've got 9 submarines waiting there who could potentially, cause the Tirpitz some problems.
Right.
Okay. Again, that's Operation Narrator there. There we go. So the merchant ships, what were they? How were they set up? The cargo I've just mentioned before. It was all other stuff I've just mentioned: tanks, planes, everything you can think of in regards to conducting a war. There was 39 merchant ships. There's actually 40 initially, but one had to return to port. But there was 39 that actually set sail on PQ18, led by the Commodore ship, the SS Temple Arch, which was a guy called Eddie Bodham Wetton. He was brought out of retirement, a very experienced sea captain, to be in charge of the 39 merchant ships. So he was the guy who was on the Commodore ship, and he was pretty much in charge. At the rear of the convoy, there was refueling tankers to refuel the ships as they proceeded. There was also actually 2 submarines that travelled on the surface with them, and the idea for them was they would drop down. If any ships came to attack, they would literally drop down out of sight, and then they would be able to defend that way. But they were never used; they just travelled on the surface with everybody else. The merchant ships, some of the merchant ships were quite, to a degree, well armed. Contingents of Marines would be on these ships with machine guns and the rest to give some kind of rudimentary protection. And finally, this come into play later. The cam ship, it's a catapult armed merchant ship, and that is a merchant ship. And on the bow of the ship is a Sea Hurricane on a catapult. So it's a single use aircraft. So basically, if air cover, if it needs to be launched, if they're getting attacked, this can be fired into the sky. The pilot will do his bits, and once he's out of ammo, what have you, he would either ditch it into the sea to be collected, picked up out of the water, or if he still have enough fuel, he'd try and make it to land and land on an airstrip back on land. So the guys who flew these planes, they knew once they were in the sky, I ain't landing back on that ship. So it's it took some guts to be one of those pilots.
Yeah, the Hurricanes came up, or the Hurricats came up in the sidebar 5 minutes ago. So popular with viewers.
Yeah. There's a guy. Well, as we go on, there's a story I'll get into about one particular pilot who flew these, and I'm ex-Air Force. I was in the RAF for 7 years. This guy's a massive hero of mine now. He really is. But anyway, we'll hit him later. Just
a question while the refueling tankers on screen there. Were these refueling tankers RFA fleet oilers or just regular merchants?
No, they were fleet oilers. They were RFA fleet oilers, yeah. There was also, not only did they travel, have the fleet oilers at the back of the convoy, they also set up kind of like a petrol station, for want of a better phrase, up at Spitsbergen as well. So some of the destroyers could break off, head to Spitsbergen and get refueled, and then rejoin the convoy, which they did on the 12th, I do believe. Some of them did that. So between the 2nd and the 8th of September, the convoy set off from Loch Ewe, traveling at 8 knots, which is like, it's not much more than walking pace, is it? It's very, very slow. So they head up towards to Iceland. The weather got pretty bad pretty soon, so it gave them a bit of especially for those who've never been on these convoys before, it gave them a bit of an appreciation of what they were in for, to be honest. My friend Charlie was on HMS Milne, 18 years old. It was his very first voyage, and he said 70% of the ship's crew, because it was a brand new ship, 70% of them were brand new sailors. They'd never sailed before. And same with the Scylla. The Scylla was a very recently commissioned ship, and that was the flagship. But the Milne, obviously, I know about the Milne because of Charlie, and he said it was virtually all the ratings were pretty much brand new. So yeah, very strange. While they were on this journey, they did spot a U-boat at one point, and they did see some German aircraft in the sky. So, like I said, the Germans well knew what was coming and what was going to happen. And they eventually arrived at Faxa Bay in the evening of the 8th of September. And then they went around the northern end of the island, met up with the other cargo ships and freighters that had come over from the States and from Canada, and then the fighter destroyer escort and all the escort ships, basically set the convoy up ready to go.
And do we have an idea, John, of the kind of the general consensus of morale? I mean, how widely known was PQ17 to every engine stoke on a merchant? Were people confident?
Yeah, well, that was it. There was obviously rumours, and people knew what had happened to PQ17, and I can tell you from Charlie's point of view, and he's a Royal Naval sailor. They pretty much knew what had happened, but they could not believe the rumours that the Navy just pulled away for no reason. They couldn't get their heads around that. It's like, well, why would we do that? So there was a bit of, but there was also a determination, especially from what Charlie had told me, determination that they were going to make sure that these ships got to where they needed to go. Maybe it was youth, I don't know. Excitement, because it's an adventure, first time he's been away like that. But certainly, I think the morale of the ratings on the ships at the time was more quite upbeat to start with.
Good. Yeah. Right.
So the close escort, these are the ships that are going to sail around and with the convoy itself. Like I said, HMS Scylla was the escort flagship, and that was a cruiser. Picture there at the bottom right. Sitting at his desk above is Bob Burnett, and he was a rear admiral, a very, very highly experienced sailor. He was the guy in charge of the escort. The fight, like I mentioned, the fighter destroyer escort was basically the 16 destroyers that would provide the majority of the protection, with the high explosive anti-aircraft capability. They would provide good protection against any incoming enemy aircraft. HMS Avenger, the aircraft carrier you can see at the bottom there, is a very strange looking ship, and that's because it's a cargo ship that the Navy had put a flight deck upon and turned it into an aircraft carrier. For the first time on an Arctic convoy, this aircraft carrier was going to travel pretty much the whole distance with the convoy itself. On board the convoy, they had 3 Swordfish aircraft that would carry out routine, regular patrols in the skies above, looking for U-boats. And also 12 Sea Hurricanes, which they could use pretty much six at a time, that could fly up and engage with any enemy aircraft that were coming in. So HMS Avenger, that was that. There's also an array of, like I said before, minesweepers, corvettes, and all the rest of it, anti-submarine roles, a dedicated rescue ship, that type of thing. But the thing about these ships, the Scylla, the destroyer escort, and the Avenger, they weren't going. I said they're going the whole way, but they weren't really going the whole way. Around about the Kolar Inlet, or just a few miles north of that, as they were getting to the end of the end of the convoy, they were going to break away and pick up a returning convoy, which was called QP14, which contained a lot of the ships that were on PQ17, the disastrous convoy that happened before, and escort them back to Iceland and then onto Scotland. So at some point during this convoy, the air cover was going to go. The Avenger was going to leave, and the Hurricanes would go with them. Again, that's when the cam ship would kick in. That's the single-use aircraft that would be the only protection, along with anything that the Russians would send over to, because by that point they're very close to Russia. Okay, if you flick on, there we go, and there's a good diagram of the actual convoy itself. So in the centre you've got the merchant ships, and around it you've got all the escorts. You know, it's quite formidable. It must have looked amazing to see it on the sea, but that was pretty much the setup, the cruising order with the full escort. And like I say, you got to remember as well, you've got the distant cover escort and the cruiser covering force as well. That's still, you know, some distance away maybe, but they're still available to draw in should it be required.
I mean, just looking at that diagram, that's a statement of military intent to get through, but it's a political statement as well. David O'Keefe is in the sidebar saying, you know, as you were talking about, you know, it's the deal between the British and Stalin, and it's saying lots of things, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's saying we're going to get through, we're going to protect the people who are part of the convoy, we're going to get those supplies through, and it's a massive, great statement of intent.
Exactly that. It's like the Germans are saying, if we can knock this out, we can destroy this, like we did with PQ17. They're going to have to think very long and hard about doing this again. When the British are saying, and the Allies, sorry, are saying, right, okay, we are going to get through, come hell or high water, we're getting through, and you're not going to stop us. And you know, if you want to come and try and stop us, we'll bring it on. We've got the firepower to repel you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the 9th and 10th September, so they've set off now. It forms into 10 columns. Almost immediately as they set off, an enemy spot a plane sighted in the sky. So we know straight away the Germans know where we are, they know where we're heading, and there's no getting away from it. They're going to be, at some point, they're going to engage with us. I get straight away. The weather turns poor. Heavy snow squalls on the 10th. So the weather's picking up. So those sailors who've never sailed before, you know, it's like, I remember one of the stories Charlie told me was that when he was in the turret with because he was in one of the gun turrets, he was a turret trainer. They had a metal bucket in the corner, and that was for the puke, because some of these guys would be sick constantly, and he never suffered from it, but he had a lot of friends, you know, and they had it. It stuck with them for quite a while before they got used to it. So they had metal buckets there ready for them to throw up.
And we talked about the last time we were on. It's just, you know, yeah, we're in 2024 now, and you know, we know that if we go anywhere where it's cold, we've got all sorts of breathable layers and the thermal this and gloves and breathable this. And back then it was thick wool, thick canvas, and you know, although they could deal with the cold, whether you're in an air on a ship or much, it's more primitive technology back then, isn't it? When you're cold, you're cold. When you get wet, I can only imagine how grim any job was as part of this. I mean, there's no good jobs.
Very, very much so. Yeah, it's. I mean, these guys are so humble as well. You know, like I said, I knew 3 of them, and they were very, very humble people. And when you said to them, you know, what you did was amazing, they're just like, oh, shrug their shoulders. You know, it's just what we did, wasn't it? Like, you don't. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, fantastic people. Really, they really were a generation that's, you know, unlike any other for me.
And just, you know, we could go down the whole rabbit hole of just the stress on one's brain as well, and you know, because when hypothermia starts setting in, your brain starts functioning more slowly. If you're cold, everybody's got to be on high alert. You're out there, people in the sidebar talking about, you know, chipping ice off the guns, and so you're cold. You've got to be alert. Long hours, I'm guessing, as well. I mean, very little time for rest.
It's like between, you know, your shifts in the whatever your main role is. They'll have your downtime, forming up working parties to go out and chip the ice and the snow out and brush the snow off the ships. Obviously, because, you know, if they let it build up, the ships would get top heavy and capsize, and that's the end of that. So they had to go out there, and it was worse for the guys in the merchant ships. Their crews weren't half as big as the ones on the Royal Navy ships. So and the ships were pretty much bigger as well. So they were out constantly. You know, what they did was during the war was fantastic. It was amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah. So, as the ships progress, so heading up northeastern direction up towards Bear Island, where they're going to scoot around and then go across and drop down again. They were getting closer to that area. There was on the 12th, some ships broke away, including the Scylla, to go and refuel up at Spitsbergen. Spotter planes in the sky were now becoming routine, so much so that they weren't even sending up hurricanes to go and chase them away anymore. And then on the 12th of September, in the north of the convoy, the U-88 was spotted by a a swordfish aircraft, and the U-88 was led by a guy called Heine Bowman. Now, Heine Bowman, once they saw the swordfish aircraft had seen them, they obviously did a dive and went underneath the water, but it was a bit too late for them, because now they've been spotted. The HMS Faulkner, which was commanded by Alan Scott Moncrief, went out to try and engage with it, picked up picked him up on the sonar on the Aztec, and he did a depth charge run, and he only took one, and he sunk the U-boat, killing everybody on board. So so that was first blood to the British. So they sent the U-boats in, and we'd taken out one pretty much straight away. I can mention that at the bottom, the weather's getting colder, snowstorms, the deck's becoming covered with ice and snow. So it's a picture of a working party, and that is taken from PQ18 on HMS Milne that my friend Charlie was part of. So that just gives a bit of an indication of how bad things were getting. That's before we've seen any kind of actually in that.
Yeah, Rob's question, did they have any extra food? I mean, the calorie intake you'd need. I mean, when you're fighting cold, you're burning more. Were they given extra rations on these?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not too certain about that. I'm not too sure. I couldn't answer that question. All I know that as they progressed, and especially when they became under sustained air attack, they pretty much were given corned beef sandwiches, and that was it. It was corned beef sandwich after corned beef sandwich after corned beef sandwich, and that was all they were eating. They're in cups of tea, coffee, and kai being like a chocolatey drink with a big thick skin on it, which these sailors seemed to enjoy. That was pretty much the staple diet as the convoy progressed. Beforehand, I'm not too sure. I do remember him say another story from Charlie that some of them asked for, when they were getting the food, have we not got anything better than this? Can we not have some potatoes or something? And they said there was potatoes like sponges. They'd been ruined, especially on his ship anyway. They'd been ruined by the cold and they hadn't been stored correctly. So all those were useless. But like I say, it was corned beef sandwiches is kind of what they lived on for pretty much a majority of this particular convoy.
Well, moving on. Thank you very much. Yeah. We're loving it, by the way.
Right, excellent. Yeah, the 13th of September 1942 is a massively significant day in the convoy and the Arctic convoys in general. This was a hugely eventful day. In the very early morning, just as it was becoming light, let's refer back to my notes here. It's been a long time since I wrote this book. Yes, it was the U-408 by a guy called Reinhard von Heimann. He was in charge. Saw the convoy and decided he'd fire a spread of 3 torpedoes towards the ships in the hope of hitting something. The guy got extremely lucky. Now, the first torpedo hit the SS Stalingrad, which is a Russian freighter, in the 10th column. So it was right on the south. So you've got 10 columns. They're all numbered, as you would imagine, 1, 2, 3, 4, right down to 10. And in the 10th column, the SS Stalingrad was sailing, and it got hit by a torpedo very badly. It took about 3-4 minutes to sink. It sank very, very quickly. 21 people were killed during its sinking, but a lot were picked up by the surrounding destroyers and trawlers, and what I believe managed to pick a lot of them up. In order to avoid the SS Stalingrad, the SS Oliver Ellsworth, an American ship, turned away, kind of off course to get around it, right into the path of one of the other torpedoes. So that got hit as well. That took a long time to sink, and there was one person killed on that particular ship. So that was left burning, and it was useless. They evacuated all the rest of the crew off and left the ship to sink, basically. So this guy he'd fired 3 torpedoes in the hope of hitting something and managed to sink 2 ships. So it was a pretty bad start to the day. As I mentioned before, some of the ships were broken off. We call it Force B to go to Spitsbergen to refuel. That then returned, and then the big thing happened, and it was this guy Werner Klumper I mentioned before, the German air ace who was the trainer of the torpedo bombers. He arrives on scene and to conduct what we call a Golden Comb attack. Now, what happens before? They were very clever about this, because before the Golden Comb attack came in, they'd sent another smaller force of aircraft to harry the convoy. The Sea Hurricanes had been dispatched from the HMS Avenger to go and engage with them. These Germans had turned around after a bit of a battle, the planes had landed back on the Avenger to be rearmed and refueled. Now, it was as they were being rearmed and refueled that the Golden Comb attack came in. Now, what a Golden Comb attack is all these ships, planes, and there was 44 of them, fly in line abreast, and all in one big long line as low as they can, and they come in all at once, and they release the torpedoes at the same time. So the torpedoes then become, essentially, as you can see on the diagram there, the teeth of the comb. That kind of looks like a comb. And it basically fires them at them and said, well, you know, with such a spread of torpedoes all coming at you, you were going to hit something. Something's going to get hit. So if you just move on one more slide there.
Yep.
There we go. So Eddie Bodden Wetham in the SS Temple Arch, he said, right, okay, we can see them coming in. You know, at first they're thinking the birds because it just didn't look right. So he gives an order to turn. So to turn, all the ships are to turn to basically in the path of the torpedoes to cut down the target area. However, for some reason, unbeknownst to anybody, even now, how exactly this happened, the ships in the 9th and 10th column, 2 of which are now missing because they've been sunk, the SS Stalingrad and the Oliver Ellsworth, they don't turn. They carry on the trajectory they're going. And for whatever reason, whether they've not heard the claxons or they've not received the order properly or whatever, but none of these ships in the 9th and 10th column make the move that Eddie Bodden Wetham has ordered. So consequently, if you fast forward again, next one, 6 ships of the 9th and 10th column are hit and destroyed, and 2 further ships within the convoy are also hit. So in total, they sink. In that one spread of torpedoes, they sink 8 ships. And my friend again, Charlie, if I go back to him, he actually witnessed people scrambling onto the hulls and going down with them. It was a massively traumatic thing for anybody to see. Obviously, to experience it's even worse, but to actually witness something like that. So clumpers, what you've got to remember as well is they've not just come in unopposed here. The fighter destroying escorts and the Scylla, they're blasting the sky with ACAC and with anti-aircraft fire. And they're shooting down. A lot of these planes are getting shot down or getting heavily damaged. They're now flying between the columns. They're getting shot at by the guys on the merchant ships with the machine guns, the DAM ships. And eventually, Clumper sees the destruction is caused and says, right, okay, time to go. And they leave before the Hurricanes can get airborne again. So as all the planes disappear over the horizon, a lot of them get shot down. It's not that the Germans don't get unaffected by this, but they've left 8 ships sinking behind them. So massively poor, and it all happened. Took 15 minutes in total from them appearing on the horizon to them buggering off. They left 8 ships sinking in the wake. Now, what's happened now? If you look at the diagram there, the 6 ships at the 2 columns that are burning, they've virtually wiped out the whole of the 9th and 10th column. There's 1 ship left, and this ship's quite significant as we go on. The SS Mary Luckenbach is left, the only ship left to float. So they order it to move into the next column and to form up with that one. So effectively, the Germans have now cut in one attack. They've cut the convoy from 10 columns down to 8. So that at this point now, this is getting pretty bad. But there's going to be a bit of a tactical problem the following day, which we'll come into if you move on to the next slide. I'll bring up what that is. Oh, right, yes. Sorry, we'll move on to further on. Yeah, the Tirpitz. The Catalina that was due to go out there and just to see if the Tirpitz where it was, it developed a mechanical fault on the 14th. At the same time, the Admiralty got in touch with Frank Hops, the guy who's in charge of Operation Orator, and said, we think the Tirpitz might be on the move. So, of course, that's going to cause massive issues because of what happened with PQ17. So what Frank Hops does is he decides, right, okay, what I'm going to do then, he's going to send up 1 PRU to do another recce over Alton Fjord to make sure they're staying where they are. And I'm going to send all available Hampton bombers to fly to where the Tirpitz would be or the route it would take, and see if it can spot them, and if so, attack it. And also at the same time, they managed to get another Catalina ready, and that was going to fly out further out to sea and search for this ship. So, like I said, during PQ17, they didn't have all this to hand at the time, but PQ18 they have. And Hops makes use of all available resources he's got to find out if the Germans are on the move to attack. Luckily, again, it was the intelligence they got through wasn't quite right, and the turbines hadn't moved at all. So luckily, there was no problem in the end. But for a moment, there was a bit of a, oh, hang on a minute, this is starting to really kick in now. On the 14th, the SS Athel Templar was sunk by one of the fleet oilers, was sunk by the U-457, which was by a guy called Karl Brandenburg. 19 were killed on that, and there was some massively heroic things happened on that ship, including the chief officer, a guy called James Reeves, who rescued two sailors from the boiler room that was flooding with oily water as the ship was going down. He went in more than once to drag these guys out and rescue them. So that happened there. That was sunk by the U-457, and then we had another more success again for the British. The U-589 was spotted. Now there's a little sad little story to that. The U-589 the previous day, one of the planes that had got shot down in the Golden Comb attack, the crew managed to make it onto the ship, onto the plane as it was floating before it sank. The U-589 saw them and rescued them and brought them on board the submarine. So these German airmen who thought they'd been rescued and they were going to survive, the following day the submarine they were in was sunk by the HMS Onslow. So a bit of pretty much very, very bad luck for them there. Werner Klumper wants to go out and do another Golden Comb. If we do keep on doing this kind of tactic, we are going to wipe out this convoy. However, Hermann Göring, the head of Luftwaffe, had other ideas. He wanted the Avenger to be sank. He wanted he wanted to have it on a feather in his cap, basically. We've sunk an aircraft carrier, because to that point in the war, I believe the Luftwaffe hadn't sunk an aircraft carrier. Any of that had been gone down by the German Navy. So he was desperate for himself and his own ego to sink an aircraft carrier. So he made them focus on the Avenger. So when they went in the following day, they went in purely to sink the Avenger. So if you just forward on a second to the next few diagrams, it's kind of as a sequence. I should have put that a bit later. If you move on to the next one, there we go. So one wave of planes goes in to conduct an attack. As they are coming away from that attack, they're getting engaged by Sea Hurricanes as well. When they come away from that attack, they see that the HMS Avenger is ahead of slightly ahead of the convoy. So as they're coming back, they radio to Werner Klumper, who's coming in again for the second wave, that the position of HMS Avenger. Now what happens is the Avenger and the Scylla, in the meantime, pretty much swap positions. The Avenger pulls back, the Scylla moves out front, so it can get its armaments into bear. So when Klumper and the 12 planes that are flying in to attack what they think is the Avenger, they're heading for the wrong ship, and they don't realise it until the very last minute. And that not only are they heading for the wrong ship, they're heading towards one of the most highly armed ships of the whole escort. So if you move on one more, so they break off. 6 break off to attack from the stern, and 6 attack from starboard. So they're going. So it's only the last minute when suddenly the guns of HMS Scylla open up. So if you move up, do one more.
Yep.
Boom! There they are. They're opening up, and not only that, there are 4 Sea Hurricanes at that minute circling around the Avenger, and they see what's going on, so they attack them from the rear. So all of a sudden, the Germans, who think they're attacking the HMS Avenger, they're not. They're attacking the wrong ship. Not only that, they're getting pummeled by the anti-aircraft fire from the Scylla, and also now behind them, they've got 4 pilots of the RAF flying at them to shoot them down. Now, again, another thing to note here: these Sea Hurricanes that are flying in to attack the Germans, they're flying into the barrage being put up by the Scylla. They are flying into anti-aircraft fire to attack these Germans and break up this attack on the Scylla. So again, it's like these pilots they're either crazy or they're extremely, extremely brave, or a bit of both. I mean, they flew straight into the anti-aircraft fire, no thought for themselves, just hell bent on stopping this attack. So if you flick on one more,
And it's just amazing, John, just to interrupt. We've done so many shows this channel about naval actions in the Pacific and the Mediterranean and North Atlantic, and we talk about the improved ASDIC and sonar and radar and the use of ultra and improved doctrine. This, that. So many things come down to mistaken identity. So many come down to the ship, a convoy gets confused for another ship or another convoy, and then an attack goes and it turns out to be the wrong thing. It's amazing how that kind of human error aspect is so critical to these battles.
That's true. I've just, if you look at that, I kind of, there's two planes that actually did make a turn and realize the error and say, hang on, it's over there. One of them being our friend Werner Klumper again. They managed to release their torpedoes towards the Avenger, but at this point the Avenger's well up to what's going on, and they avoid the torpedoes quite easily. However, if you just flick back again, we spoke about the destruction of the SS Mary Luckenbach. This is well worth a moment on. During the same attack, one of another German plane. Now, luckily, flew over the Luckenbach and dropped its torpedo. I've had a couple of sources here. There is a theory that it wasn't this that blew it up, but it was because a torpedo was spotted heading towards it around about the same time. However, what the general belief is that this plane that was flying over the Mary Luckenbach dropped the torpedo and it landed in its hold. Now, the SS Mary Luckenbach was carrying 1,000 tons of TNT. So it basically went straight into the hold and exploded, and it pretty much vaporized the whole ship, killing everybody on board. There was, I don't know how many died on that. I think it was 65 people were killed on the SS Mary Luckenbach. Yeah, so it was a shocking event. Very lucky for them, for the Germans, that they'd hit this. It was, the ship sailing near to it, the SS Nathaniel Green. It was actually lifted from the sea and slammed down again. It was that the violence of the explosion was that much. A lot of debris started raining down upon that ship, and there's injuries all over the place. Just on the like I said, the ship next to it. It was that bad that the captain of the ship gave the order to abandon. He thought they'd been hit by a torpedo, and as they were starting to get off and leave the ship, they realised, well, hang on a minute, maybe we're mistaken, and it was soon found out that it was mistaken, and so they went back to their action stations, and the ship carried on. Again, a little note, it's in my book as well. Bit of a shout out to a guy called Paul Gill, an American. I think he was a third mate on the Nathaniel Green. And as they were under attack like this, he noticed that the Stars and Stripes wasn't being flown from the masthead like it should have been. So as this was all happening all around him, before they abandoned the ship, he ran into the wheelhouse and took the flag out, and he hoisted it under fire. So it's worth a mention. Like, these little things kind of make the story for me, these little bits of heroism and what have you. But yeah, that was the story of the Mary Luckenbach. So unfortunately, everybody on board that ship was killed. Wow. But ultimately, again, after the attack and they're going back, the Germans, there's more and more of them getting shot down, or more and more of them getting so damaged that it's going to take a long while to repair those aircraft. So as each attack is going to come from this point on, the numbers of aircraft that are coming out to attack are diminishing. They're getting less and less, which is obviously good news for the Navy. So if we'd like to move on.
So back to the Hurricanes, by the way, because we had a couple of questions in the sidebar about were they armed with 20mm cannons at this point, and are they Fleet Air Arm pilots or RAF?
Well, I know the guy on the cam ship was certainly RAF. He was a flight lieutenant. That's the cam ship. In regards to these, the actual. Just give me 1 second. I'll tell you. So the numbers have kind of slipped my mind. Of which, where are we?
And thanks for all your questions, by the way, folks. Great stuff in the sidebar.
Yeah, the three Swordfish were from 825 Squadron, and the Sea Hurricanes from 802 and 822 Squadron. I think they were Fleet Air Arm pilots. I'm kind of making a claim because I'm ex-Air Force, so please forgive me for that. but yeah, but certainly the cam ship was Flight Lieutenant Arthur Burr, which we'll get to shortly. Yeah. So, yeah.
And going back to the Golden Comb concept, I mean, considering Goring's focus on going for the Avenger, because the Golden Comb tactic, although as you said, it causes all the aircraft to come down low, they suffer casualties later on, but part of its success was because of the order not being received, or whatever that confusion was of those ships not turning. So it was partly Allied mistake stroke delay that made the German flight over more successful, and yet they don't do it a second time on that because of Goering. It's again, human mistakes or assessments are really fascinating.
Yeah, you're right. It's had that turn been made. I mean, it's more that, well, it's probably highly likely that more ships would have highly unlikely that more ships would have been sunk. So yeah, I think the failure of the turn certainly added to the ships being hit, and there's no doubt about it. Had they, I mean, like I said, there's only two further back. You've got 39. No, sorry. At this point now, you've got 37. Well, you've got a lot less because the others been sank that morning. There's still a massive amount of ships there. Yet there's only two further back than the two columns, the 9th and 10th columns that got hit. The others didn't. The others managed to avoid them. So, as a tactic, I suppose it makes sense. You go, we spread so many all in one big long line. Get out of the way of that. Well, they were able to get out of the way of them, the majority of the ships. So, like I say, it's a funny one. It's whether I mean, it's a tactic. Was it used further in the war in other theatres? I'm not too sure. But yeah, it certainly had an effect that day, primarily because the ships in the 9th and 10th columns never made the move.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant stuff. Back to you.
Yeah. So of course, as we're moving on now, the 15th and 16th September, we're getting closer and closer to the destination on the White Sea. But however, at this point now, the sailors are becoming fatigued. As we know, they've been working constantly. They're either under attack or they're chipping ice off the decks. They're grabbing sleep where they can. Personal hygiene's taking a back seat, really, because they're constantly working. So it's just human biology. You're going to get tired. You're going to get a bit knackered, but you've also got to remain highly focused, especially when you're under attack. I suppose that's when your adrenaline kicks in. But the guys are doing a fine job. But I said but the air attacks are coming. Action stations are sounded on a regular basis. However, they're getting the less controlled at this point now. They're under constant attack. As soon as one bunch of planes come in, another lot come in after them. But they're less controlled. They're piecemeal now because of the amount of planes that have been shot down and the amount of planes that have been severely damaged. So I mean, at one point, the Germans got more crews than they got planes because there's that many damage now. Again, on the 16th, there's more success. Another U-boat is sunk by HMS Impulsive, the U-457. So they are fighting back here. But on the 15th, I think it was, there was thick freezing fog, and the air attack stopped, which was good for one reason. Obviously, they're not under attack anymore. However, the weather is getting particularly worse. So they're constantly out on the decks chipping and getting rid of the ice. There's thick fog. They're having to put chip floats out behind because the ships can hardly see the others, and it's getting pretty dire. But there is a respite from the air attacks, so some of the sailors are now being able to get a little bit of rest. As they're getting north of the Kolar Inlet now on the 16th, this is where quite a big thing happens. The fighter destroyer and escorts, the Scylla, and the aircraft carrier, the Avenger, they all leave the convoy and head towards the rendezvous with the returning QP18 to escort them back to Iceland. So they're pretty much on their own now. Of course, it's just there are still a lot of warships with them, but they haven't got the same firepower as they've had up until this point, and also they've not got the same air cover. Now, the idea is that because they're close to Russia, they can call in the Russian Air Force to come in and assist if there's any kind of aerial attack, but they are very unreliable. Where if you've got the Sea Hurricanes to hand, as soon as they see them come in, they're up in the air and off they go. They're having to contact the Russians, to scramble or whatever to send them out. That takes time. They're also quite unreliable in what they send. So, for all intents and purposes, the only air cover we've got at this point is the catapult ship. And that's pretty much it. So if you want to move on one more.
Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah, so this is my big hero here. So the ships are in the White Sea, and they are joined, saying that, by 4 Soviet destroyers that position themselves around the convoy. So it's even though the main escort has now pretty much left, we have got now 4 Soviet destroyers that have joined with them. The extreme weather on the 17th prevents their attack. The weather, I mean, again, it is horrendous. It's whipping the sea up. It's shocking. It's shockingly bad. However, on the 18th, the weather abates, and the Germans resume their air attacks. At this point now, they're at the mouth of the White Sea. They're very, very close to where they need to be. One final ship is sunk, and that's the SS Kentucky. It's actually hit, and it kind of flounders. They managed to get everybody off the ship before, and I think it runs aground. They've got to abandon it, and eventually it sinks. But then as well, the guy who's now in charge is a guy called hang on a minute. HMS Malcolm is the ship that takes over from the Scylla as being the flagship now.
Yep.
And it's Commander Russell on board that, who's now in charge of the defence of the convoy. So he orders the barrage balloons to be raised from the ships. Again, there's not a lot of protection with that. After this Kentucky sunk, another 15 Heinkel 111s come in to attack the convoy. So this is the point now where our friend Flying Officer Arthur Burr kicks in. He is ordered to gear up, get on the Hurricane, and he's catapulted into the sky. So you've got one man here against 15 Heinkel 111s coming in, and they are coming in to conduct another Golden Comb attack. That's what they're trying to. That's what they're getting set up for. So Burr flies his Hurricane up above them. He swoops down, focusing on one particular aircraft, blasts away with his machine guns, smashes the cockpit up, flies into the sea, he shoots it down. This causes another one to veer off and also crash into the sea. So basically, in one hit, he's shot down 2 planes. The 13 others are carrying on. However, he's quickly run out of ammunition. He's got no ammunition now. So he radios back, I'm out of ammo. So rather than think, okay, I'll need to ditch in the sea now and they can pick me up, or I'll try and fly to a base in Russia, he thinks, no, I won't do that. They don't know I've run out of ammunition. I know I have, they don't. So what he does then, he does a series of buzzes. He flies at them and breaks up the attack on more than one occasion, causing them to scatter around and what have you. So much so that eventually the Germans give up the idea and bugger off back to where they came from. So he single-handedly has stopped this attack. He's now very, very low on fuel. So what's he going to do? He decides, he finds out, he gets radioed through to that there's a base at a place called Keg Ostrov, near to Murmansk, and he might want to head for there. So that's exactly what he does. And he heads there. He manages to land on the airstrip with literally 5 minutes of fuel left in his tanks. So wow. So that's the story of Flying Off. And the DFC there is what he was awarded for that particular action that he carried out. Unfortunately, the young man, was only 24. He was killed later in the war. It was an accident. He crashed while doing a test flight on an aircraft in I think it was in Norfolk somewhere.
Well, and it's coming up in the sidebar how little, comparatively speaking, we talk about the Fleet Air Arm and naval aviation generally. I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit hole of Coastal Command and Short Sunderlands and Catalinas. It doesn't seem to draw the attention that the other aircraft types and units do. But yeah, what incredible balls of steel had, didn't they?
Yeah, like I say, when I discovered this story about him, it was like, you know, I was in the Air Force. It's like, wow, this is a story and a half. What a man he was. But unfortunately, like I say, he died very young because of the accident he had up down in Norfolk. Sorry. So that's the story of Arthur Burr. So at this point now, the convoy is getting pretty much into it's in the White Sea. So it's getting very close to where it needs to be, the Vina River. Now, once it gets there's a massive storm takes place, and the ships are spread far and wide. It's horrendous. Some are grounded, having to be, you know, wait for the sea to rise again and to drift off or to be pulled out by other ships. It is a complete and utter. The scattered. The weather is shockingly bad. However, eventually the storm calms down. They manage to form up again, and then they've got to wait at anchor at the Dvina River overnight before they can start being brought in. So pilots are being sent out from the Russian from the Russian side to bring them into port. One of them I've put there, including Anatoly Sakharov. Now, Anatoly Sakharov was the ship's captain for the SS Stalingrad, the very first ship to be sunk on the Convoy, and he was a native of Archangel. He knew those waters, so he was utilized as a pilot, and that probably saved his life, because immediately as he finished his duties and landed in Archangel, he was arrested by the Soviets, and he was for losing his ship, basically. So he was put under arrest. Now, the British decided to award him with a medal. Can't remember which one it was, to be honest, but they awarded him with a medal basically for his contribution to getting the ships into port. And it's probably that saved him from what the Soviets possibly would have done to him for losing his ship. So Anatoly Sakharov, he was actually in the water when the Stalingrad went down. He was actually in the water for 40 minutes, and the waters were freezing. So he clung on to a bit of debris, managed to get picked up and was saved. But like I say, it was in a long time. He was in the right state when he got out. But like I say, later on the convoy, he was put to use for piloting the ships in. A strange thing happened on the night overnight, the 21st and 22nd. Now, a lot of the ships now at this point are being brought in the docks, and they're about to start taking the kit off. The Luftwaffe bombed Archangel. It left the port alone. It just bombed the city for some strange reason, left the ships where they were. So some are saying, maybe it was the Finns that were actually doing the bombing or whatever, because they were still engaged with the war with Russia. They were and they didn't want to damage America. I'm not sure, but for some strange reason they decided to bomb the town and leave the docks alone. And so, of course, all the ships now that are left, the remaining ships are in, and they were all unloaded by 20th of October. So it took about a month to take all this gear off, and then immediately transported to where they needed to be. Some of that kit making it down to Stalingrad, where the battle was pretty much raging at that point. So it's and that was it. That's PQ18. It's at port now. Meanwhile, QP14 is heading back towards Iceland. I won't go into that. I do cover QP14 in the book that I've written, but, and it was quite eventful as well. As quite a lot of action went on with that particular return convoy. So, how did they look at it afterwards? A bit of a victory. It was like, okay, we got there. There was 27 ships got through. Still meant that 12 cargo ships were sunk, as well as the fleet oiler. So it's like, okay, it's enough for us to continue with the Arctic convoys. But the problem being that Winston Churchill, because of what had happened with PQ17 and a few other things as well, he found himself in August in Moscow with Stalin to discuss various things. However, Stalin, of course, at that point was upset by the loss of PQ17 and all that equipment, and he wanted more convoys to come, PQ19 and PQ20. Churchill was under pressure from both Stalin for that reason, and under pressure from Roosevelt for Operation Torch. And he said to he says to the I've actually got the quote here from a telegram that he sent to Clement Attlee, because the Admiralty was saying we can't do both. It's one or the other. We haven't got the shipping to do Torch and do your Arctic convoys to this scale again. They're going to have to wait. So Churchill sent a telegram from Russia to Clement Attlee. He was the Deputy Prime Minister, and he was looking after things back in Britain at the time while he was away. And he sent the message saying, it is indispensable to run further PQs after September. I shall be asked about this, and I must know. I cannot believe Admiralty resources will not admit of this as well as Torch. So Churchill himself thought we can do both. The Admiralty, no, we can't. The Admiralty won that particular argument. So what happened in the following 2 months is there was no Arctic convoys to that scale again for the next couple of months. And instead, Operation FB, what Operation FB was 13 merchant ships traveling independently without any escort at 12-hour intervals, so each ship on its own. Didn't go very well, because 5 were sunk, 3 returned due to one reason or another, and only 5 made it through. So it wasn't a viable way of carrying on. They were picked up again in December when Torch was over and done with, But then for some reason they changed the code word, the code from PQ and QP to RW and RA for the outbound and returning convoys for some reason. Why did Hitler not commit surface ships? That's a good question. Why, he had so many in the area. The Tirpitz, he had the 3 big battleships up at Elsenfjord with more warships beside. They could have very easily gone out and engaged. So why didn't they do that? So there's a few arguments for why that didn't happen. One of them is that the success of PQ17 was the German success of PQ17 and the scatter order. The Germans didn't really realise that was the threat of the Tirpitz that caused the scatter order. They thought it was the fact that they were doing well with their aerial attacks and with the submarine attacks, and they thought that was enough. So they didn't realize. I mean, to be honest, all they had to do was send the Tirpitz out of port again, and the same thing might have happened, but they didn't do that. So they kind of misinterpreted why the scatter order came about. They were probably aware of everything that was out there anyway. They'd have been well aware of the cruiser covering force. They'd been but they wouldn't have known that Bonham Carter wouldn't have engaged with the Tirpitz, but they would certainly know that the ships were out there. They would know the distant covering force was out there. They would have known there was submarines patrolling near the Lafferton Islands. They would have known about Operation Rage. They'd have known of all these things. So they would have had, if they were sending their ships out to do that, there would have been a major sea battle, which the Germans may well not have won. So that's probably possibly another way. And also, the Bismarck was sank the previous year with a loss of over 2,000 sailors, and that was a massive kick in the morale of the German public at the time. And it was like, well, if the Tirpitz gets sunk, its sister ship, we have the same thing again. So they're probably or possibly the reasons why the Germans didn't commit to deploying all those resources they had from their navy. But again, that's debatable, isn't it? That's up for people to argue each opinion, really.
Well, as you said, the Allies are at the time of the war where if they put strength in the Arctic convoys, they have to take it away from the Mediterranean or the North Atlantic or North Africa. Well, the Germans too are also fighting those logistical problems as well, because they're up to their necks of things post Barbarossa. They're still fighting in North. So both sides are having to, consider where they put their strength. So you can't win all the. You can't try and get all the properties on Monopoly. You have to go for one street, to use a NAF analogy, which came to my head.
Well, that's a good one. It sums it up. I think you're spot on there, Paul, to be honest. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. We've got a couple of questions, and then we'll before that, we'll just nudge it onto your book. And as I said at the beginning of the show, folks, the links to John's website in the description below. There they are again. And I heartily recommend the book. And John writes novels and historical fiction, all sorts of other things as well. So there we are with that. But a couple of questions. So the figure you just had of 20% of the supplies on the Eastern Front coming from Arctic convoys. Sean Brennan saying, where does that source come from? How do you work things like that out? That's
come from a number of sources. To be honest, historians since the war have stated that that's the amount of material. I mean, obviously, initially at the beginning, it was very limited because it was very, it was small amount going as the ships were carrying that much. But as the Arctic convoys went on, I mean, PQ17 took the biggest hit. PQ18 again, it's like say we lost 12 ships there with masses and masses of amounts of equipment. All this equipment wasn't coming from Britain, by the way. A lot of this was lend-lease that was coming from the United States, who were producing massive amount of war material. Like I said, the figure itself has come from many historians through the years of just how much was provided by the Allies. Like I say, it's not just Britain; it was by America, Canada, ourselves, and that's where that figure comes from.
And the other question, which was much earlier in the show, David O'Keefe was saying, have you dug down into the specific types of cargo that were being carried and on what ships? Because I know it came up when we discussed PQ17 with Drakenfell. They were, do you put a bit of everything on each ship? Do you have one ship full of, aircraft engines, one full of industrial, supplies? Have you done that work, or someone done that work?
I'll be honest, I haven't, but I do know there's a book coming out shortly by a guy called William Smith, who's goes into the minutiae of all of the convoys, of what was on the ships, on the political aspects. He digs very, very deep into the convoys as a whole. So you'll probably find your answers probably in that book. Just to go off one thing, the Mary Luckenbach had 1,000 tons of TNT. It was pretty much all it carried, so that was pretty much, you know,
that was the one thing on that ship. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I just wonder whether that, you know, it's just playing the counterfactuals. If the Germans could have chosen 10 ships to sink, whether there were 10 that could have been given them more of a victory than another 10, you know, I mean, there's, you know, we've talked about it a lot with David O'Keefe. You know, we think of it being tanks and armaments, but it's not just that. It's tooling, it's machine tooling,
it's parts, it's raw materials, it's medicines, it's you know, jeeps, trucks. It's,
I mean, and body beef and corned beef. I mean, the Russians get lots of that as well. So I mean, some of the things they're getting are immediate kind of emergency supplies, and some are kind of more long term, keeping the victory going.
In the book, I do cover a little bit about like the quotas, where the Russians would ask for a certain, okay, we need this ASAP. So with, you know, Churchill tanks or different whatever Sherman tanks, wherever they are, they would ask for specifics to go on each particular convoy. So when they got through that, you know, the ships get sank, and so they're not going to get everything that they've asked for. So consequently, the quota for the following month or the month after would be, well, they didn't get it here, so we still need those, and we still need this as well. So that was, it was decided between the two respective government departments of what exactly would be needed, and then obviously we try and get that equipment out to them.
And thank you for that. My last question is going to be basically, do you think that there is more history to uncover with the Arctic convoys? I mean, you know, we talk often on this channel about the fact there are however many books about Arnhem, there are lots of books about the dam busters. Arctic convoys, there are a few, but from your point of view, I'm going to assume you think there's more work to be done on it.
I think so, because you know, I'm a World War II nut, always have been. But the Arctic convoys are something that I knew very, very, very little about until quite recently, when I met one of the veterans who was on and told me his story and generated my interest in those convoys. And there's been very few, compared to other theatres of war, there have been very, very few books written about the Arctic convoys. There's been there's a very, very good documentary what Jeremy Clarkson did about PQ17. And that seems to be one that everybody seems to focus on. If you are going to talk about the convoys, it's the disastrous one, not the ones that made it and the ones that, you know, got all this equipment through.
Well, that's the Battle of the Atlantic argument, isn't it? We talk about the disasters, and Alan Allport, when he came on a couple of weeks ago, doesn't talk about the number of convoys that went unscathed, but somehow they don't get people's attention. It's always the ones with the big kind of dramatic occurrences.
The dramatic ones, you're spot on, yeah. So there's a limited amount of books being written about them. There's a limited amount of films and documentaries and the rest that's been made about them. So it just goes in my mind. There's probably a hell of a lot more stories that can be pulled and that's still out there that haven't been told yet. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And maybe even from the Soviet point of view as well, although perhaps not right now. But anyway, it's been great talking to you, John.
One final thing, just about the Soviets. I know the minute with the Ukraine thing, it's all gone pear-shaped. But I've got a friend who's was the curator at the museum in Archangel, and she's told me that the Arctic convoys, they celebrate them every year. It's a massive thing in Russia. About all those guys, Russians as well, and British, and they hold all those people who sailed on them in massive high regard. It's a big thing. They have big displays and all kinds of things goes on the anniversaries of particularly Dervish, the first one, when it arrived on 31st of August 1941. That's a hugely celebrated day in that area of Russia because of the Arctic convoy. So there's a lot more knowledge about it in Russia than there is over here. But I say it's just a shame what's going on in Russia at the moment.
Well, for many reasons. But yeah, we will leave things there, John. It's been fantastic talking to you folks. You know what to do. Go and check John's website out, get that book ordered, and learn yourself some Arctic history. Folks, I'll be back on Monday. Couple of 3 manic shows on Monday. One in the morning, UK time, with Dave Holland from Australia, and one scheduled so far, but there'll be a second one. Then there's regular stuff happening during the rest of the week. So thank you, John. Thank you, viewers, for your questions.
Thank you very much.
World War II TV. Enjoy your weekend. Cheers, John. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.